Hey everyone, it's Lachlan. Just before we start this first episode of the podcast, I just want to say the audio is a little bit off at the start. We made the rookie error of leaving Zoom to automatic voice and noise detection, so bear with us on this first episode of the Waymaker podcast, and we hope you'll join us. Again, let's get on with the show. You're listening to Mind Over Money, presented by Waymaker. Welcome to Mind Over Money, presented by Waymaker. This is a podcast that helps Australians change their money mindsets so they can live a life of freedom, generosity, and joy. I'm Lachlan Nicolson, and I'm joined here by Archie. G'day, Archie.
G'day, Lachlan. Great to be on our first show together.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone. This is the first episode. We're excited. And what are we talking about today, Archie?
We're going to talk about assumptions today. So assumptions are pretty much the way we're processing our thoughts and our thinking, and they're things that we're basing our decisions on, and they're also things that we're basing what we're hearing as well. Like, so we're hearing stuff, and our assumptions are filtering the way we're hearing things and the way we take things in. So they're very important because it determines what we hear. And it also determines what we think and what we say and what we do.
Yeah, I love that because it's our mindsets that we have to change before we can get ahead. So this is a really great topic to start this podcast with. And we probably didn't explain this at the start, but this podcast, over the next couple of episodes, we're just going to be having conversations about mindsets before we get into any topics around wealth building. And, a lot of what we do at advocacy through our advocacy program at Waymaker is actually this topic, teaching people how to think about their finances, because that's where the change begins. And then from there, we can actually help them with the tools and the wealth building system.
Yeah. How we think really affects, the strategies and the tools that we use. And just to give you an example, it's like, if you give someone a pair of pliers and they've never used a set of pliers before, you're going to see some pretty interesting ways that they use them, especially if they don't know what to do with them. And, and there's some pretty funny videos that you'll find on YouTube, where people are doing some really strange things because they don't know what they're dealing with.
That's a great example of assumptions. There's actually a video of a guy walking along carrying some sandbags. And the guy brings along the wheelbarrow and says, put them in the wheelbarrow. And he puts them in the wheelbarrow. The guy walks off. And then the guy picks up the wheelbarrow with everything inside it. Doesn't know. He just assumes that the guy knows how to use the wheelbarrow.
Yeah. So we don't want to get stuck with assumptions that are holding us back. The whole thing about financial freedom, having freedom and joy is that, we're not being held back. And currently there's going to be things that are holding us back. And those things that are holding us back are definitely going to be attached to assumptions.
Yeah, I love that. And it's just one assumption that can change or unlock a whole new world of joy and happiness. And so we've got a list of assumptions that you've put together, that assumptions that you've heard and that we've heard through the financial community and through Waymaker. And we've got 4 main categories we're going to run through. And these are just 4 areas that we could fall into those default ways of thinking, and that can hold us back from taking action and actually having financial freedom. Before we go jump into those though, what's the biggest assumption that you see in finances, Archie?
I'd probably say it's, that we can assume that only certain people can do well. Whereas the truth is that everyone in Australia can do really well with finances. And can build wealth and have financial freedom. But if we've got that mindset that only certain people can do well, then that's the one thing that'll hold us back. If we think about in Australia, even if we're living on some government benefits, we still have the opportunity to do something and to achieve financial freedom and to actually build wealth. But if we think that we need to have a certain level of income or a certain type of job, or, there can be all sorts of assumptions that we're holding on to, or that we have to be, perfectly healthy or whatever it is. That's the thing that'll end up holding us back.
Yeah, I constantly come back to, when coaching business clients, we talk about, it's not the successful businesses are not those that have the most resources, but the ones that are the most resourceful with what they have. And I guess it's the same thing with our finances is, personally, it's not about having a massive income, but it's about what we can do with that little bit of income that we have today. And we'll be talking about this a lot over the coming episodes, but we come back to this all the time at Waymaker, is you only need a little bit to get started. And what you do with that little bit, it can grow over time, and we can see that compounding effect. And that little bit every day, those small consistent steps can turn into a lot over time. Okay, let's jump into some of these categories. So the first big bucket is income. So what are the sort of assumptions that we see around income?
So I'd probably say, for a lot of people, I do hear this coming through, is that, they're waiting for that income that they see will make them wealthy, or that, that they'll think that, when they've reached a certain income, that's when they're wealthy. And our income really doesn't prove anything about our wealth. It's just an income. So if we think that a higher income is going to solve our problems, it actually won't. That assumption about our income is the one thing that will be holding us back. So if we can look at our income and we got, say $20,000 a year coming in, and we're thinking that that's insufficient, then we're not going to do anything. But if we got $20,000 a year coming in income, and we can say, well, I wonder what I can do with this. What is it that will actually help me to get ahead here? As soon as we open up our thinking, all of a sudden, we're going to start to see and find new information and new ways of doing things, and a whole new world will open up to us.
Yeah, in Australia, we have this tendency to think that I guess all our problems will be wiped away with a high income, that all we need to do is just reach that elusive income target, whatever that is. And there was on Channel 9, they put it out through the news. There was actually a study done recently, a survey, I should say, and they found out that it was $300,000 a year was the income that Australians think they need to feel wealthy. $300,000 a year for us to feel wealthy, in quotation marks there. And I thought, yeah, that's interesting, because that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And if we listen to what we're saying, especially, if we're thinking about our situation currently, if we hear ourselves saying, when I get that promotion, or when I get that job, or, when my income increases, then I'll be able to do something. They're the telltale signs that you've got an assumption around how much income you're going to need before you can build wealth. If we start to listen to what we're saying to ourselves and to other people, we can actually hear what our assumption actually can be around income.
Yeah, and it's really good. You mentioned before about the example of even if we got $20,000 a year, because we've probably got some uni students listening in, and you're studying and you've got a part-time job earning 20 grand a year. And so it can be easy to say, for the next 4 years I'm studying, I'm not going to, invest. I'm not going to save to buy a car. I'm not going to, save to buy a home. But the encouragement there is that could be an assumption that you're putting off doing something with your finances until you've finished, your study or whatever it is that you're doing. And we can actually get started with a small amount of money, and we don't have to wait until we get what we perceive as a higher income, which is sort of like a goal, an ever expanding finish line we never quite reach. We're always chasing that next increase.
This is a good place to jump in. I've actually seen where young people, in that situation, studying and, working part-time, have made the extra contributions to super and picked up another, $1,500 from the government in the super contribution scheme. And then they've also picked up, the other benefits that the government gives, which is no tax, within their superannuation. And after 5 years, of working part-time and studying, I've seen those young people come out with another $20,000 in their superannuation. And you go, oh, that's not very much. But that $20,000 can go on over the next 25 years and become well over $300,000 within their superannuation. And then it can go on to become over $1 million. And then in retirement, that $1 million can generate another 3.3 million in income. So what those young people have done right at the start has had a massive impact on all their future income. And it's reduced how much tax they pay in the future. It's just huge, but it doesn't look like much. Yeah, we never want to discount, what a small income can do.
Yeah, that's so good. The second category that we have here is debt. And there are a lot of assumptions around debt. Where do we start with this guy?
Yeah, well, a lot of us do think about what we're wanting to achieve or, to obtain. And in Australia now, debt is pretty much the way we go about getting anything that we're looking for. So whether it's a holiday, a vehicle, pretty much anything now, even just buying clothes and stuff now, we can use debt to do it all. It's just part of our society and part of our thinking that we're going to use debt and that debt's going to get us what I'm looking for.
The debt's going to make it happen. You're right. It seems as a young person, I look around and everything about, buying a car, or even when you go to the shops, there's these posters everywhere, buy now, pay later. It's just, I guess the assumption is that debt is normal, debt is okay, and that debt is the way in which we buy things. But that is a big assumption that a lot of us are now just picking up from just generally the culture that's around us now.
Yeah. And what we want to look at here with debt is that let's say we're looking at purchasing a car. If we had to pay cash for a car, we're going to be, we're going to feel the pain of using our cash to buy a car. So we're going to be a bit more involved in the process of actually buying the car and how much we're prepared to spend and how much we're prepared to lose, if the car doesn't work out to be a good car. But when we go down the path of buying a car with debt, the debt actually removes some of our decision making. Like we become more lethargic about the way we process it. And the debt also generates a good feeling in us, because we're using someone else's money. So we're not so worried, if this car doesn't work out, that's okay. But it's quite often leads to, very bad outcomes down the track. You get 1 or 2 years down the track and you're just going, I wish I'd never taken that debt, to buy that car. And so that's often what we see happen. Whereas we've got, ways of actually using our own cash that can generate sufficient money for us, that we never have to pay for a car again. Like if we just start, putting some money aside that we would have, put aside anyway if we bought a car with debt and start investing that, just after 7 years, we can be $90,000 in front in just 7 years' time. And so again, if we're only got a low income, that's a huge variation, in our circumstances, to be $90,000 ahead just after 7 years.
I found it difficult sometimes when I actually went looking for a car to even find the price of a new car, because it's all tied to the weekly repayments, whether I'm looking at what's the total cost of this car. But when we're using debt to buy the car, we don't even know what the total cost is. We're just looking at that repayment number and not actually processing this car could cost me, say it's $30,000. And actually, when you start saving towards that, you go, okay, that's a bit of money. and you're analyzing, do I actually need this car? Could I get another brand or a cheaper model? We had this recently with buying a mattress. And because, we're operating on a cash system, when I mean by cash, I mean physical cash, but, using our own money, we're saving up to buy a mattress. And in the past, I would have just pulled out the credit card and put it on a credit card and not given it too much thought. Just gone with whatever the marketing is saying. But then we actually found ourselves doing a lot of research and found a really good mattress. Actually found out that a lot of mattresses are just marketing.
Yes.
That most mattresses are the same. It's just a difference in brand and, creative words and good posters. And so we actually came out with a really great mattress for a really good price. And it's because we were using cash and we were saving towards that purchase. And so it really got us thinking about what it is we were actually buying.
Yeah. And look, one of the key assumptions around debt is that we think that the bank is our friend. And that's an assumption you don't want to have. The bank is not your friend. The bank is a business, and the bank generates its own cash flow and its own profit from lending you money. So their number one goal is to sell you debt, to sell you finance, and because that's where they're going to make their money. So please don't assume that they're your friend. They're there for a specific purpose, and that is to lend money. So, classic here would be, you go out and buy the car, and then you go, okay, now my next goal is to buy a house. But then now you're going to find that buying that car has actually stopped you from being able to buy your house. And, when we look at what, generates wealth, one of the first things that generates wealth is buying your own house. That's one of the first things. So in Australia, it's very important for us to have our own home. And part of the reason for that is that it does build wealth. And so, if we've gone out and bought that car, and used that debt thinking that, we're getting ahead and we're using someone else's money, it can really trip us up. And then we find that we're unable to actually buy the house that we really want to buy. The thing with debt is that it can build up so quick. We can go from having no debt, and a year later, we can have hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, for personal loans, car loans, credit cards, all sorts of finance, leasing arrangements. It can happen so fast. And the stronger your income, in other words, you've got a permanent job with a government or a permanent job in health, the banks are actually going to pursue you. They're going to be chasing after you and trying to lend you as much money as possible because they want to make you a lifetime customer. And the more debt they can lend you, the more they can lock you into being a lifetime customer.
So you mentioned property, and that's probably good to go into the third category. So we've talked about income, debt. The third bucket is investing. And, one of the main ways we can build wealth is through property, but it's not the only way. And we love property in Australia, but we also have a lot of assumptions around property. I've cringed many times hearing people say things like rules of thumbs, like property will double every 10 years. It's like, So what are some of the assumptions that you've been hearing around property and just investing in general?
Oh yeah, this has probably got to be our biggest field because there's so many assumptions in this area that really will hold us back. With property, the big assumption I hear there is people say you can't go wrong with property. Well, let's burst that bubble. Yes, you can go wrong with property, and you can go wrong in a big way. And look, I've helped people come out of situations where they owe hundreds of thousands of dollars or where they've gone bankrupt because of buying an investment property. I'm not saying investment property is wrong. I'm just saying it's the way they went about it. So, and they made the assumption that they couldn't go wrong with it, and they didn't look into it well enough. And, that assumption caught them out. So we're not saying there's anything wrong with property. We're not saying there's anything wrong with shares or other ways of investing. What we're saying here is that our assumption can really cause us to make choices that will end up getting us in trouble.
Yeah, and it can be based on old data, like the old saying, property doubles every 10 years was based on a period in history where that was true. And then that season ended. And people carried on saying that for another couple of years, another decade. And I'm still hearing it today.
If we look at some of the, the wisdom that goes back thousands of years, one of the sayings is, don't stop. Once you've done an investment here, don't stop investing elsewhere. So, probably the modern way of saying it, a few years ago was, don't put all your eggs in the one basket.
Yeah.
And so what we do see is someone will put everything into just one property or into one investment or one thing that they're focusing on. And what we're encouraged to do, as I was saying before, this is old wisdom, is have multiple things. So be flexible, be adaptable, be able to change, because you don't know which one's going to pay off, is what the old saying is. So you don't know whether it's going to be this house or another house, or you don't know if it's going to be, your superannuation or, different investment options that are available to us.
Yeah. So property is one way that we can invest. And then what about shares? Because shares and super and investments, sometimes there's this assumption that shares are risky, or, superannuations, that's for the old generation, or, super's boring, or super's putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. This is the frustrating part for me. When I keep hearing the same assumptions around shares and around superannuation, people say that, superannuation, they'll make the assumption that superannuation can't help them. But the thing about superannuation is it's just a vehicle to help people build wealth where they pay very little tax. So, years ago, the Australian government, worked out that Australians hate paying tax. So they created an investment vehicle, which is superannuation, to help Australians save and not pay tax. And so they created a really good, investment vehicle. And then people come out and say, superannuation doesn't work. But it's because people have made assumptions about it instead of actually understanding what it actually is. And when we look at shares are the same thing. People say shares are too risky. Well, again, that's an assumption that people have made because they've heard a story or they've been told that shares are too risky. And really, when we look at the Australian economy is built on businesses, and shares represent businesses. So, if we look at CBA Bank, if we buy shares in CBA Bank, then we're actually, buying a share in that bank. And, CBA Bank is there to do business and to grow, the same as the other businesses in Australia. And the government, works to make sure that businesses in Australia can grow and prosper, because that's where the jobs come from. That's where we get paid from. That's what makes Australia a great country. So, shares are risky. Well, the risk is really who you are, not really the shares. Again, it's our assumptions coming in. If we look at Australians as a whole, we're a bit of a gambling society. So we like to gamble. And, we're looking for that big win. And so we can have an assumption that if we get a big win, that all our problems are solved. Yeah. So we can end up, because of that assumption behind us about, getting that big win, we can end up putting our money in things where we're pretty much guaranteed we're going to lose it. But then we start coming out with all these assumptions that really start to hold us back. And the last one here around investing, which I've already just, mentioned there, is about tax. Australians don't like paying tax. And so we have this assumption that if we can avoid paying tax, then we'll do better. And what I've seen over the years is that those who focus on avoiding tax end up doing a lot worse than those that don't worry about tax.
Yeah.
And we've got, some really great investment vehicles and investment structures in Australia, such as superannuation. That means that we can invest and grow our money and not pay tax. And so, again, we're back to Australia is a great place for everyone to do well. And the sooner we get rid of those assumptions that are holding us back, the sooner we'll start to do better.
Yeah, even for the younger generation, I'm seeing young business owners go out and buy cars and buy all sorts of gear purely to pay no tax. But then the problem is they have no cash flow in their business. So they're relying on this tax return to sort of save them at the end of the financial year. And they're actually missing out on doing something really great with their money.
Yeah, this is a classic in Australia. Let's be self-employed so that we can claim all these tax deductions. And by doing that, we then can avoid paying tax. But then the bank looks at our self-employment and goes, sorry, we can't lend you money to buy a house because you don't have any profit.
Taxable income. Yeah.
So it really works against us, and we can be spending all this money thinking that we're saving on tax, but we're not actually generating any wealth, and we're not paying off our home, and we're not, we're missing out because we're focused on tax being the enemy. And really, we can use tax to be as a motivator rather than a negative thing. We can use it as a motivator, because the better we do now, the less tax we'll pay in the future. And so the more we do now around investments and investing and building our wealth, we'll end up paying way less tax in the future. So I always come across this with clients in our financial planning business, is that people who've built their wealth are in a fantastic position to not pay tax throughout the rest of their life. And yet I'll have other people who haven't done the work to build their wealth that come in at the same age, and they're just paying a mountain of tax, and there's nothing we can do to avoid it. That's what I love about what we do, is that we can turn lives right around and make such a big difference.
So this other area we have, this last category, is advice. And there's lots of assumptions around advice in our country around getting financial advice. Do you need advice? You can get advice off the internet. You shouldn't have to pay for advice. What are some of the assumptions that you're seeing that's really holding people back around getting help and professional advice around their finances?
Well, if we make the assumption that we can do it, we're limiting ourselves to what we know and what we understand, and we're also increasing our risk. So we're increasing the risk that it's going to fail when we rely on ourselves. And that's like we talked about right at the beginning. You hand someone a pair of pliers who doesn't know how to use a pair of pliers.
It's like doing your own surgery. Let me just make the cut here, and that's my heart.
Yeah. So whereas, and it's the same with finances and money, is that we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And so that increases our risk of doing it badly and getting it wrong. And then that can stop us from actually, we make the assumption that you can't do well, and we stop actually trying. Whereas, when we're looking at advice, I'll use a fund manager as an example here. So we can try and put our money into shares in Australia by buying the shares directly and cut out all middle people and do it all ourselves. And so we can buy shares in different companies and we can hope to do well out of that. Or we can go through a fund manager, and that fund manager is going to use their expertise to invest into companies and businesses that they can manage the risk on. And because they're managing the risk, they can then achieve a higher return long term, over a 7-year period. They can end up achieving a much better result because they're using their expertise and their ability to manage the risk and to invest, in an appropriate way. And again, we've got research that shows that people investing in shares in Australia themselves do an average return of somewhere around 3%, and the market itself does like a 10% return. But then when we use these fund managers, we can do between a 12 and a 15% return. So, there's a very big difference between 3% return compared to 10%.
Wow, especially over a long period of time. That adds up.
Oh, massive. And then there's a big difference between 3% and 12%. And so we pay the fund manager, for the expertise, and we receive, the reward for that. But when we do it ourselves, we're going to pay for it. It's just that we're going to pay for it in poorer returns, or it's going to totally fail, or we're unable to achieve what we want to achieve because we don't know how to go about it properly.
Yeah, and we have to get beyond our own emotions and our own judgments And I guess this is what we're coming back to, is assumptions. Is by having an assumption that we don't need advice, then we're actually stuck within our own assumptions when it comes to investing. Like we talked about at the start, we don't have that open mind. Like we're talking right here on this podcast, people are listening to this and going, oh, wow, I didn't think of it that way. So hopefully just in this conversation that we've broken some of those assumptions, or started to sort of make cracks at some of these assumptions that we have and that we've been holding on to. Yeah.
And look, one of the things that comes into this area quite strongly that I see is people say to me that I'm going to do my own research, and I say, where are you going to get that research from? And they'll say to me, I'm going to jump on the internet. And the internet is full of opinion, but it's not full of research. So to actually get research, research that actually shows you about financial markets, research on, the way we invest, there's all sorts of, research out there that's done. To actually get access to that research, you have to be able to access, where that research is being done. Is it through a university? Is it through a research house? So you've got to be able to access that research. You've got to pay money for that. And so if you're just surfing the internet and you're not paying anything, all you're getting is someone else's opinion.
Or paid advertisement. A lot of this financial journalism is just spruiked products for companies.
Yeah. So, and the other thing is, how do you research something you don't know? Like the key here is don't be afraid, don't make the assumption that you can do it for nothing, and don't be afraid to pay for things. And it's not just advice, but even paying for a fund manager who's going to expertly invest your money, because that can be the difference between winning after 10 years or giving up after 10 years. Because a lot of people that do their own share investing, we will find that after 10 years, they're not doing share investing anymore.
And we know that it's that time. We need that 30, 40 years to actually build lifelong wealth. And, I was just looking again at the stats on Warren Buffett, and he made like 99.8% or something of his wealth after his 65th birthday. Because it all came from that compounding effect, which it's hard to wrap your mind around, but it's true. Time in the market, time investing. And so if we make these assumptions and then we give up, we can potentially be leaving millions of dollars on the table because of our assumptions. Well, as we wrap up, I think today's main theme is that we need to check our assumptions regularly and, assess whether they're actually true and whether they're holding us back. Any final thoughts, Archie?
Yeah, I'd go back to the beginning. We want people to have freedom and joy in around their finances and generosity. That doesn't mean that we have to be a multimillionaire. It doesn't mean that, in 1 year's time, that we're going to have all this money. If we have a long-term plan and, we can break that down into regular goals and regular things that we can see happen, then we get to share in that joy of, seeing those things happen, working through the plan. Life is going to happen along the way. So we've got to be able to adjust. And the more flexible we are, in our ability to adjust, but that's what a plan's for. It allows us to adjust. If we don't have a plan, that doesn't make us happy. So that having a plan, having a long-term plan, and then working our way towards that's where we get our true joy, our true generosity from, our true freedom from, is knowing that we're winning. Because if we keep feeling like we're not winning, that will really cause us some problems.
Yeah, it'll cause us to give up. And really, we can all win.
If your goal this year as a university student is to move ahead by $5,000, then that's a great goal. If your goal this year is to save a house deposit and you've got two incomes and you've got the ability to save $30,000, then you save that $30,000. Both goals will achieve the same amount of joy and they'll achieve the same sort of results because they're both focused on what you can do right now with what you have.
Love it. And
then if you're like 60 years of age and you're nearly ready to retire, what are you doing about your investments? And, if you could, change your investments and increase your returns on your wealth by 2% per annum, that can lead to another million of income in retirement. Well, are you going to put that in place? Because that's something you could be doing.
Love it. The power of assumptions. Well, thanks everyone for listening. And I think we'll have to edit there. So we hope that this helped break some of those assumptions that you maybe had around your money and your finances. Before you go, check the show notes below to follow us, Waymaker Finance, on Instagram, or check out our website, Waym, that's waym.com.au. Thanks again. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening, everyone, and catch you later, Archie.
Thanks, Lachlan. Catch you later, mate.
Hi, just a disclaimer here that everything we discussed today is not personal financial advice. It's just a conversation and for education purposes only. If you do want personal advice that's tailored to your financial situation, you should talk to a financial advisor or professional. We can recommend one if you like. Just head to waym.com.au or send us a message. Okay, bye.